The world grows quiet, and the wind carries a whisper through the trees. Tonight, we follow Elara, a little girl with wide eyes and a heart full of wonder, and her friend, a single crimson leaf clinging to the last warmth of autumn. Let the soft rustle of leaves, the gentle sway of branches, and the hush of the season wrap around you. Find a cozy spot, breathe slowly, and drift with the story into a space where dreams begin to stir. The Last Leaf on Maple Street. The crisp air of early autumn held a scent that Elara found particularly enchanting, a heady mix of wood smoke, damp earth, and the sweet decay of fallen leaves. Maple Street, her domain, had transformed overnight. The emerald cloak of summer had been shed, replaced by a riot of ochre, russet, and gold. Every gust of wind sent a cascade of color tumbling down, swirling in miniature cyclones along the cobblestone sidewalks and rustling through the dry grass in front yards. For most of the children on Maple Street, this was simply the backdrop to their games of tag and hide-and-seek, a fleeting spectacle before winter's stark white blanket descended. But for Elara, it was a living, breathing masterpiece. Each falling leaf a brushstroke, each gust of wind a symphony. Her imagination, a boundless realm where anything was possible, was particularly stirred by the season's dramatic metamorphosis. She saw not just trees shedding their foliage, but ancient sorcerers casting off their summer robes to reveal winter's regal ermine. She heard not just the wind whistling through bare branches, but the whispers of spirits preparing for their long slumber. And her eyes, sharp and observant, were constantly scanning for the extraordinary amidst the ordinary, for the hidden magic that she was certain lay just beneath the surface of their quiet, familiar world. Her home, a cozy cottage with a perpetually smoking chimney and a porch swing that creaked a gentle lullaby, was nestled comfortably between the grander Victorian house of the elderly Mrs. Gable and the sturdy, practical dwelling of Mr. Henderson, the baker. Maple Street itself was a curve of contented homes, each with its own patch of garden, its own picket fence, and its own unique character, all unified by the overarching presence of the magnificent maple trees that gave the street its name. In autumn, these trees became giants, their canopies ablaze with an intensity that seemed to draw the very sunlight into their fiery embrace. It was beneath one of these colossal maples, the one that stood sentinel at the edge of her family's property, that Elara first noticed it, a leaf. But not just any leaf. While its companions had long since surrendered to gravity, succumbing to the season's inevitable pull, this one clung with an almost defiant tenacity. It was a vibrant, astonishing crimson, a shade so deep and pure it seemed to pulse with an inner light. It was perfectly formed, its 5 points sharp and distinct, its surface unblemished by the browning or curling that afflicted its fallen brethren. Elara stopped in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. She had seen many beautiful things in her young life, the iridescent shimmer of a hummingbird's wing, the delicate unfurling of a new rosebud, the deep violet of a twilight sky. But this crimson leaf, suspended against the backdrop of a pale autumnal sky, held a different kind of beauty, a beauty that spoke of resilience, of a secret strength. It was as if nature, in a moment of exquisite artistry, had decided to paint one final, perfect masterpiece before surrendering to the coming frost. She approached the tree slowly, her small boots crunching on the carpet of fallen leaves. The wind, which had been rustling the branches with a playful abandon, seemed to soften as she drew near, as if sensing her reverence. She reached out a tentative hand, her fingers brushing against the rough bark of the trunk. Then she looked up, her gaze fixed on the singular splash of crimson. It was a beacon, a tiny flag of defiance, planted firmly in the heart of autumn's inevitable decline. "Hello," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The leaf seemed to sway gently in response, though it was likely just the breeze. To Elara, however, it was an acknowledgement, a greeting from a kindred spirit. She spent the next hour beneath the maple, observing her newfound treasure. She watched as other leaves, yellow and brown, danced their way to the ground, their descent a silent surrender. But the crimson leaf remained, a steadfast sentinel, a splash of defiant color against the encroaching, muted tones. She began to visit the leaf every day, rain or shine. She would sit with her back against the warm trunk, gazing up at it, sharing her thoughts and secrets. She named it Crimson for its striking hue and declared it her special friend. She told Crimson about the intricate patterns of the spiderwebs she discovered in the morning dew, about the shy rabbit that sometimes darted across their lawn, about the stories her mother read to her before bed. Crimson, in its silent way, seemed to listen, its vibrant color a constant, reassuring presence. Elara's fascination with crimson deepened, morphing from simple admiration into a profound belief in its unique nature. She felt with the certainty only a child can possess that this leaf was not ordinary. It was touched by something more, something magical. Perhaps it held a fragment of the summer's warmth, refusing to let go. Perhaps it was a tiny ember from a forgotten fire, burning bright against the chill. Or perhaps, she mused, it was a guardian, tasked with reminding the world that beauty could endure, even when everything else seemed to be fading away. She shared her discovery with her mother, her eyes wide with enthusiasm. She exclaimed one afternoon, pointing upwards, "Crimson is still there." Her mother smiled, her gaze following Elara's pointing finger.
"It is a lovely leaf, darling,"
she said, her voice warm and gentle. "But all the leaves are beautiful in their own way, Elara." Elara, however, was not entirely convinced. Her mother's words were kind, but they lacked the spark of wonder that Elara felt. For her, crimson was not just a beautiful leaf, it was the beautiful leaf, the one that defied the rules, the one that held a secret. She imagined crimson whispering to the other leaves, urging them to stay, to hold on a little longer, but they, weary from the long summer, had simply let go. Crimson, however, was different. It possessed a stubborn will, a refusal to be swept away by the prevailing currents of change. The neighborhood, with its familiar rhythm and comforting predictability, served as the perfect backdrop for Elara's imaginative world. The steady drone of Mr. Henderson's lawnmower on Saturday mornings, the distant laughter of children playing in the park, the scent of baking bread wafting from his kitchen, these were the anchors of her reality. But woven through this fabric of the mundane were threads of enchantment, and crimson was undoubtedly the most vibrant of these threads. As the days grew shorter and the air bit with a sharper chill, Elara's visits to crimson became more important. She would bundle herself in her warmest scarf and mittens, her nose red from the cold, and make her pilgrimage to the maple tree. She would trace the veins of other leaves that had fallen around the base of the tree, marveling at their intricate patterns, but her eyes would always return, drawn by an invisible force, to the single, defiant crimson leaf, still clinging to its branch. One particularly blustery afternoon, a strong gust of wind swept through Maple Street, tearing at the remaining leaves with renewed vigor. Elara watched, her heart in her throat, as entire branches shed their colorful burdens. She braced herself for the inevitable, her small hands clenched into fists. She saw other leaves, still clinging, ripped free and sent spiraling away, their brief hold on life finally broken. But when the wind finally subsided, leaving a hushed stillness in its wake, crimson remained. It swayed, yes, but it held fast, its crimson hue seemingly more vibrant than ever, as if the very force of the storm had only served to strengthen its resolve. Elara let out a shaky breath of relief. "You're so brave, Crimson," she whispered, a tear of admiration and a touch of fear freezing on her cheek. The fear was a new sensation, a subtle awareness that even the most magical things were not entirely immune to the forces of nature. But the admiration far outweighed it. Crimson was a symbol, a testament to the enduring power of beauty and the strength of holding on. In a world that was constantly changing, constantly shedding its old forms, Crimson was a reminder that some things, some special things, could persist. She began to incorporate crimson into her imaginative games. It was no longer just a leaf. It was a tiny, watchful dragon guarding its hoard of summer warmth, or a fallen star that had landed in their maple tree, refusing to fade. She would tell stories to her dolls, her voice hushed with a conspiratorial tone, about crimson's bravery and its magical properties. Her world was a rich tapestry, and crimson was a jewel woven into its very heart. The familiar sights and sounds of Maple Street, the distant clang of the trolley bell, the scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's fireplace, the friendly wave of a passing Mr. Henderson, all formed a comforting backdrop to her private world of enchantment, a world where a single crimson leaf held more significance than the turning of the seasons. As winter began to loom, casting its long shadows and whispering its icy promises, Elara knew that Crimson's time might be drawing to a close. The air grew colder, the sun weaker, and the remaining leaves on other trees were now mere skeletal remnants. Yet Crimson remained, a solitary splash of vibrant color against the encroaching gray. Elara felt a pang of sadness, a premonition of loss, but it was tempered by a deep sense of gratitude for the gift of its presence. It had been a bright, defiant spark in the heart of autumn, a testament to the enduring magic she knew existed, even if others couldn't see it. She would carry the memory of Crimson's vibrant hue, its steadfast defiance, with her, a silent promise that even in the face of inevitable change, beauty and wonder could and would persist. The crimson leaf, which Elara had christened Crimson for its defiant hue, had become more than just a sight to behold. It was a charge, a sacred trust. As the autumn wind began to keen with a more insistent, chilling voice, Elara felt a burgeoning responsibility settle upon her small shoulders. It was no longer enough to simply admire crimson. She had to protect it. The wind, once a playful companion, was now a formidable adversary, its gusts strong enough to rip the very roots from the earth. Elara watched, her small brow furrowed with concern, as the gale tore through the branches of the great maple, sending a blizzard of yellow and brown leaves spiraling away like lost dreams. Each time the wind buffeted the branch where crimson clung, Elara's heart leaped into her throat. Her first instinct was to offer a physical shield. When a particularly vicious gust threatened to dislodge her precious leaf, Elara, without a second thought, scrambled onto the low-hanging branch, bracing herself against the trunk. She extended her small hands, cupping them around Crimson, forming a miniature sanctuary against the onslaught. The rough bark scraped against her skin, and the wind tugged at her hair and coat, but she held firm. The leaf, nestled within her palms, felt impossibly fragile, yet somehow, through her touch, she imagined imbuing it with a resilience it already possessed. She whispered reassurances, her voice a low murmur against the wind's roar. "It's all right, Crimson," she breathed, her words fogging in the cold air. "I'm here." The crimson seemed to deepen, to glow a little brighter, as if her words, her touch, were a form of nourishment, a secret elixir that kept it vibrant. She began to develop a ritual of protection. Every day, after school, she would make her way to the maple tree, not just to observe, but to tend. She would meticulously clear away any fallen leaves that had accumulated around the base of the tree, creating a small, bare patch directly beneath Crimson's branch. She imagined this cleared space as a sort of sacred ground, a buffer zone, that would protect Crimson from the trampling feet of the oblivious world, and perhaps from the very earth itself, which seemed to be pulling everything else downwards. She would then sit, her back against the trunk, and extend her hands, sometimes just resting them on the bark beneath the leaf, other times cupping the air around it, as if to create an invisible dome of protection. Her imagination, always her most potent ally, transformed these simple acts into grand gestures. She wasn't just a little girl protecting a leaf. She was a knight guarding a precious jewel, a sorceress weaving a spell of preservation, a guardian spirit ensuring that the last ember of summer's fire would not be extinguished. She would whisper tales of bravery to Crimson, weaving narratives where the leaf was not merely a passive object, but an active participant in its own survival. "You are strong, Crimson," she would tell it, her voice filled with conviction. "You hold the memory of sunshine. The wind cannot take that from you." She began to believe that Crimson possessed a hidden power, a magical essence that was directly responsible for its tenacious hold. Perhaps, she theorized, the leaf wasn't just clinging through sheer will, but through an intrinsic ability to absorb and reflect the very energy of life. She imagined its crimson hue as a concentrated form of autumn's vibrant spirit, a spirit so potent that it resisted the inevitable decay. "You're not just red," she confided to it one afternoon, her fingers tracing imaginary patterns on the air beneath it. "You're holding on to summer's warmth, aren't you?" This belief fueled her determination. The changing weather was a constant challenge, a series of tests designed to gauge the strength of her resolve, and by extension, Crimson's. The crisp, invigorating breezes of early autumn had given way to something colder, more biting. The wind began to gust with a violence that made the branches of the maple groan and sway. There were days when Elara arrived at the tree, her cheeks rosy from the cold, only to find Crimson being whipped back and forth with alarming ferocity. On those occasions, her protective gestures became more frantic. She would stand on tiptoe, stretching her small arms as high as they could reach, her fingers brushing against the stem, willing it to hold on. She invented games that revolved around this struggle. She would pretend that Crimson was a tiny flag, planted on the highest peak of a mountain, and she was the sole defender against an invading army of wind and rain. She would huddle at the base of the tree, shielding her eyes, and narrate the battle, her voice rising and falling with the imagined drama. She'd exclaim, her hands held up as if deflecting blows. "But Crimson stands firm! It will not surrender its color!" Her mother, observing Elara's deep and unwavering attention to the single leaf, would often smile with a mixture of amusement and tenderness, she'd say, her voice soft. Elara would nod enthusiastically, her eyes shining. "It's special, Mama," she'd insist. Her mother, while acknowledging its beauty, would gently remind her of the natural cycle. "All the leaves have their time to fall, darling." But Elara held on to her conviction. For her, the falling of the other leaves was a sad inevitability, a surrender. Crimson's continued presence, however, felt like a victory, a testament to a different kind of power. She started to see Crimson's tenacity as a kind of magic that could be contagious, a secret that she could learn and perhaps even share. She would spend hours gazing at the leaf, trying to decipher its secrets, to understand the source of its strength. She would sit in quiet contemplation, her small hands tucked beneath her chin, her gaze fixed on the vibrant crimson. She imagined that if she concentrated hard enough, if she focused all her love and attention on it, she could transfer some of that resilience to herself, or perhaps even to the world around her. One particularly blustery afternoon, a sudden, violent squall swept through Maple Street, unleashing a torrent of rain and wind. Elara, who had been playing in her room, rushed to the window, her heart pounding. She saw trees bending almost double, their branches thrashing wildly. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this was Crimson's greatest test. She couldn't bear to watch. Instead, she retreated to the living room, where her mother was knitting by the fire. She sat on the rug, her knees pulled to her chest, and closed her eyes, picturing Crimson. "Hold on, Crimson," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Just hold on. I'm sending you all my strength. Imagine you're a tiny ship, sailing through a storm. The waves are big, but your mast is strong. You won't break." She imagined the crimson leaf as a small, resolute flame, flickering but undying, against the overwhelming darkness. She envisioned her own love and care as an invisible net woven around the branch, holding it steady, supporting it against the fury of the gale. She held this image in her mind for what felt like an eternity, her small body tense with the effort of her silent vigil. When the storm finally abated, leaving behind a world washed clean and glistening, Elara felt a hesitant urge to check on Crimson. She pulled on her boots and raincoat, her mother offering a gentle nod of understanding. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and ozone. As she approached the maple tree, her eyes scanned the branches. The ground was littered with a fresh carpet of fallen leaves, a testament to the storm's power. But then, her gaze landed on Crimson. It was still there. It was battered, yes, some of its edges seemed slightly frayed, and it hung at an angle it hadn't before, but it was undeniably present, a defiant splash of red against the sodden brown and yellow. A wave of relief so profound it made her knees weak washed over Elara. She let out a shaky breath, a silent sob of joy catching in her throat. She reached out, her gloved fingers brushing against the leaf, with a tenderness that bordered on reverence. "You did it, Crimson," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "You were so brave." It was a shared victory, a testament to the power of belief and the unwavering strength of a bond forged in innocence and affection. She believed, with all her heart, that her love had been a tangible force, a shield as potent as any physical barrier. From that day forward, Elara's belief in Crimson's magical properties only deepened. She saw its survival not as a fluke of nature, but as a reward for its inherent beauty and a testament to the power of her own unwavering care. She would bring it small gifts, a smooth pebble, a brightly colored feather, a single, perfect acorn, leaving them at the base of the tree as offerings. She would tell it stories of the other children on Maple Street, of their games and their laughter, as if Crimson were an esteemed elder, privy to all the secrets of their small world. She would share her own dreams and aspirations, her voice earnest and full of wonder, believing that Crimson, in its silent, crimson way, offered wisdom and encouragement. Her dedication became a quiet, constant presence on Maple Street. While other children chased after soccer balls or built forts in the dwindling daylight, Elara would be found beneath her maple tree, a small sentinel of devotion. The neighbors, accustomed to her unique enthusiasms, would often wave or offer a friendly greeting as they passed, a gentle acknowledgement of the little girl and her extraordinary leaf. They saw a child's innocent fascination, a fleeting phase. Elara, however, felt she was engaged in a profound dialogue with the heart of autumn itself, a dialogue whispered on the wind and answered by the enduring glow of a single crimson leaf. The wind continued its attempts to reclaim Crimson, its gusts growing colder and more determined as winter's approach became undeniable. But Elara remained steadfast, her commitment a silent pact with the wind, a testament to the enduring power of love, and the belief that even the most ephemeral beauty could be preserved through sheer force of will and an unwavering heart. The wind, no longer a playful whisper, but a sharp, insistent breath, carried the scent of frost. Mornings arrived cloaked in a pearly haze, and the sun, when it finally managed to pierce the veil, offered a pale, watery warmth. The days, once languid and drawn out, now hurried towards an early dusk, their hours contracted as if squeezed by an invisible hand. Elara felt the change keenly, not just in the air that nipped at her nose and fingers, but in a subtler, deeper shift that resonated within her. Winter was no longer a distant concept, but a tangible presence, its icy fingers reaching out, threatening to snatch away the last defiant spark of autumn. Her days had become a carefully choreographed dance around the maple tree. Each afternoon, the moment the school bell released her, she would race towards it, her heart a hummingbird's wings against her ribs. Her mother's gentle admonishments about the need for warmer clothes, about the importance of sensible play, seemed to fade into the background, lost in the urgent symphony of the rustling leaves and the ever-present whisper of the approaching cold. She no longer simply admired crimson. She was its guardian, its staunch defender against a force she could not see but could most certainly feel. Her rituals, once born of simple affection, now held the desperate intensity of an encroaching siege. She would arrive, her breath misting in the frigid air, and immediately assess the situation. Had the wind been particularly cruel overnight? Were there any new signs of weariness on Crimson's vibrant surface? She would meticulously clear away any fallen leaves that had dared to gather at the base of the tree, as if tidying the ground itself could somehow fortify the branch above. She imagined each fallen leaf as a casualty, a fallen soldier, and she was determined to prevent Crimson from joining their ranks. She would then settle herself against the rough bark, her small body a bulwark, her gaze locked onto the leaf. She'd extend her hands, not to touch, but to create an invisible barrier, a dome of pure will, willing the wind to veer away, to find less resilient prey. Her parents, observing this deepening fixation, exchanged worried glances. Her father, a man of practicality, would sometimes gently prod, "Elara, darling, all the leaves have to fall eventually." He'd point to the bare branches of other trees, skeletal fingers reaching towards the sky, a testament to the season's inevitable march. Her mother, more attuned to the nuances of her daughter's sensitive spirit, would simply offer a soft smile and a reassuring pat. "It's a beautiful leaf, Elara," she'd say, her voice laced with understanding. But Elara refused to accept this deterministic view. Nature, in her mind, was not an immutable force, but a force that could be reasoned with, even persuaded. Crimson, she believed, possessed a unique strength, a vital spark that defied the natural order. It wasn't just a leaf. It was a miracle, a living embodiment of autumn's last, defiant hurrah. She whispered to it constantly, her voice a low murmur against the wind's increasing roar. "You're special, Crimson," she'd say, her eyes wide with earnest conviction. "You're stronger than they think. You're going to show them." She began to notice how the world around her seemed to be collectively preparing for the coming cold. On Maple Street, the transformation was palpable. Lawns that had been emerald carpets were now matted and brown, their vibrant hues leached away by the persistent chill. Neighbors were busy, their movements brisk and purposeful. Mr. Henderson next door was meticulously wrapping his rose bushes in burlap, his brow furrowed with the effort. Mrs. Gable across the street was already tending to her winter garden, her hands gloved and nimble as she secured frost covers over her cabbages. Even the children, Elara's former playmates, seemed to be changing their games. Their boisterous summer shouts were replaced by more subdued activities, their minds perhaps already turning to the indoor pursuits of winter, board games, storybooks, the warmth of the hearth. Yet Elara's world remained anchored to the maple tree, to the vibrant splash of red that clung tenaciously to its branch. While others built barriers against the cold, Elara felt she was building a bridge against it, a delicate connection between the dying embers of autumn and the promise of its return. She would spend hours just observing, her small body almost invisible against the tree's massive trunk, a silent sentinel. She studied the way the light fell on Crimson, how its color seemed to shift and deepen with the changing angles of the sun. She noted the subtle tremor of the branch with each gust of wind, a tiny dance of defiance. She imagined herself as a part of the tree, her own life force entwined with crimson's, her own breath adding to its resilience. Her imagination, that boundless realm where anything was possible, became her most potent weapon. She conjured images of Crimson as a tiny, valiant warrior, standing on a wind-swept battlefield, its scarlet banner waving defiantly against the grey onslaught. She envisioned herself as its general, issuing silent commands, bolstering its courage. She'd mentally command, "Do not falter." She even started to believe that her unwavering focus, her intense concentration, was somehow physically supporting the leaf, holding it aloft against the forces that sought to pull it down. This belief, however, was not without its anxieties. Every rustle of leaves, every sudden gust of wind, sent a jolt of fear through her. She would hold her breath, her eyes fixed on the branch, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The sight of other leaves, once her companions, now fallen and forgotten, served as a grim reminder of Crimson's precarious position. They lay in sodden heaps on the sidewalk, their colors muted, their forms curled and brittle, a silent testament to winter's power. Elara would skirt around them, a pang of pity mixed with a fierce surge of protectiveness for her own chosen leaf. She began to carry small, smooth stones in her pockets, each one chosen for its particular shape or color. When she felt overwhelmed by the encroaching cold, by the sheer weight of winter's inevitability, she would take out a stone and rub it between her fingers, focusing on its solid, unchanging nature. She imagined these stones as anchors, as tiny embodiments of permanence in a world of flux. She would then place them carefully around the base of the maple tree, as if creating a protective circle, a ward against the ephemeral nature of the season. The other children of Maple Street were, for the most part, oblivious to Elara's singular struggle. Their world was one of immediate pleasures and shared adventures. They were already talking about snow forts and sledding, their conversations filled with the excited anticipation of winter's playful side. They would sometimes see Elara beneath her tree, a solitary figure amidst the fallen leaves, and would call out to her, inviting her to join their games. But Elara would usually just offer a small, distracted wave, her attention already drawn back to Crimson, to the silent drama unfolding on its branch. Her mother, noticing this growing isolation, would gently try to encourage her. "Perhaps a game of tag would be nice, Elara." But Elara's heart was not in the warmth of the kitchen or the fleeting thrill of a game. Her heart was with the leaf, a tiny, vibrant ember against the encroaching frost. As the days grew shorter and the air sharper, the whispers of winter intensified. The wind became a constant companion, its voice a low moan that seemed to carry the lament of dying things. The trees, stripped of their leafy finery, stood stark and skeletal against the bruised twilight sky. Even the sky itself seemed to hold its breath, a vast, somber canvas awaiting the first dusting of snow. Elara felt a growing urgency, a sense that time was running out. She spent more and more time at the tree, her small face etched with a seriousness far beyond her years. She would trace the veins of Crimson with her finger, as if trying to memorize its very essence, to absorb its vibrant color into her own being. She started to believe that if she could just hold on long enough, if she could just keep Crimson alive, then perhaps, just perhaps, winter itself would be held at bay. One afternoon, a particularly fierce wind descended upon Maple Street. It tore through the branches with a ferocity that made the entire maple tree groan and sway. Elara, who had been sitting at its base, was buffeted by the sudden onslaught. Leaves, a swirling vortex of brown and gold, danced madly around her. She instinctively shielded her eyes, her heart leaping into her throat. She squeezed them shut, picturing Crimson, her silent mantra echoing in her mind. "Hold on, hold on, hold on." She imagined her own small hands, invisible and warm, cupping the branch, steadying it against the gale. She willed every atom of her being to project strength, resilience, and a fierce, unwavering love towards that single defiant leaf. When the wind finally relented, leaving behind a hushed stillness, Elara slowly opened her eyes. The ground was littered with more fallen leaves, a testament to the storm's power. Her gaze immediately flew to Crimson's branch. For a terrifying moment, she saw only the bare, wind-whipped wood. Then her breath caught. There it was. Crimson. It was still there. It was hanging at a slight angle, its edges a little tattered, its color perhaps not quite as radiant as before, but undeniably present. A wave of relief, so potent it made her knees tremble, washed over her. Tears, hot and sudden, welled in her eyes. She whispered its name, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "Crimson," she breathed. It felt like a shared victory, a triumph of her unwavering belief over the undeniable forces of nature. But the reprieve was temporary, a fleeting moment of defiance. The air grew colder still, biting and relentless. The sun, when it appeared, was a weak, distant disk, offering little warmth. The world seemed to be shrinking, its vibrant colors leached away, replaced by shades of gray and muted brown. The very landscape seemed to be preparing for slumber, for the deep, frozen sleep of winter. Elara, however, refused to yield. Her focus on Crimson had become an almost sacred duty, a personal crusade against the inevitable. She felt a profound sadness for the leaves that had fallen, but for Crimson she harbored a fierce hope, a conviction that its fate and hers was somehow intertwined. She continued her vigil, a small, unwavering sentinel at the foot of the ancient maple, her heart a tiny, beating drum against the growing silence of the approaching winter. The whispers of winter were no longer just whispers, they were a growing chorus, a symphony of cold and stillness, and Elara, with her crimson charge, stood resolutely against its tide. The first snowflakes began as tentative kisses, feathery touches on Elara's nose and eyelashes. They were shy at first, hesitant to commit, as if testing the resolve of the lingering autumn. But the wind, with its newfound authority, urged them on, coaxing them from the bruised, grey sky. Soon, the hesitant kisses turned into a steady, insistent patter, a hushed drumming against the window panes. Maple Street, which had stubbornly clung to its russet and gold hues, began to surrender. The fallen leaves, already sodden and clinging to the earth, were gently, irrevocably buried beneath a burgeoning white blanket. Elara watched from her perch by the window, her breath fogging the glass, mirroring the ephemeral nature of the snowfall. Her gaze, however, was not on the transformation of the street, but on the maple tree. Crimson, her precious crimson leaf, was still there, a defiant splash of color against the encroaching monochrome. It hung precariously, a tiny flag on a battlefield slowly succumbing to the enemy. The snow, however, was relentless. Each flake that landed on Crimson seemed to weigh it down, to pull it closer to the inevitable. Elara's heart ached with a preemptive grief, a sorrow for a loss that was not yet complete, but felt agonizingly certain. Her parents, sensing her quiet distress, made their usual overtures. Her father, with a gruff gentleness, suggested a game of checkers, the polished wooden pieces gleaming under the lamplight. Her mother, her voice soft as the falling snow, offered hot chocolate, its steamy sweetness a comforting counterpoint to the chill outside. Elara accepted their offerings with a vague nod, her thoughts tethered to the maple tree. She imagined Crimson struggling against the accumulating snow, its delicate veins, once so vibrant, now burdened by the weight of winter. She pictured herself there, at the foot of the tree, brushing away the flakes, a futile gesture against the overwhelming power of the storm. The following morning, Maple Street was transformed. The familiar contours of sidewalks, lawns, and driveways had been softened, smoothed, and rendered pristine by a thick, unbroken layer of snow. The world outside was hushed, muffled, as if nature had imposed a profound silence upon the land. Elara, Bundled in her warmest coat and mittens, her cheeks already flushed from the cold, ventured out. Her first, desperate pilgrimage was to the maple tree. She stood before it, a small, solitary figure against the vast white expanse. The tree itself was a magnificent sculpture of ice and snow, its branches etched with delicate frost patterns. And then she saw it, or rather she didn't see it. Where crimson had clung with such tenacious bravery, there was now only a bare twig, dusted with snow. The branch was stark, empty, a skeletal finger pointing towards the sky. A sob, raw and ragged, escaped Elara's lips. It was a sound that seemed too large for her small frame, a cry of pure, unadulterated heartbreak. She reached out a mittened hand, her fingers trembling, and touched the bare twig. It was cold, unyielding, devoid of the vibrant life she had so fiercely willed into existence. Tears streamed down her face, blurring the pristine landscape, each drop a testament to her lost hope, her defeated belief. She had fought so hard, had poured so much of her young spirit into preserving that single leaf, and now it was gone, swallowed by the indifferent immensity of winter. Her parents found her there, a small, huddled figure lost in the overwhelming whiteness. Her mother knelt beside her, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. She didn't offer platitudes or try to minimize Elara's grief. Instead, she simply wrapped an arm around her daughter, a silent gesture of shared sorrow. Her father stood a little way off, his expression a mixture of sadness and understanding, the pragmatism that usually defined him softened by the sight of his daughter's profound disappointment. Elara remained there for a long time, the cold seeping through her clothes, her tears freezing on her cheeks. The world felt muted, drained of its color and life. The magic she had so desperately sought, the magic she had believed resided in Crimson's defiance, seemed to have vanished with the leaf itself. She had envisioned a world where her will could hold back the tide, where a single act of fierce love could alter the course of nature. But nature, in its immense, impartial power, had simply continued its cycle, indifferent to her fervent pleas. As the days turned into weeks, Elara's initial heartbreak began to soften, not into forgetting, but into a quiet acceptance. The raw pain of loss was gradually replaced by a deeper, more contemplative sorrow. She still visited the maple tree, drawn by an invisible thread, but her vigil was no longer one of desperate hope. It was now a pilgrimage of remembrance. She would trace the bare branches, imagining Crimson's vibrant presence, a phantom warmth against the biting wind. One afternoon, as she stood beneath the snow-laden branches, a realization, subtle yet profound, began to dawn. The world, stripped of its autumn finery, possessed a stark, unadorned beauty that she had previously overlooked. The snow wasn't just a blanket of loss, it was a canvas of purity. The trees, their naked branches stark against the pale sky, revealed a different kind of strength, a resilience forged in dormancy. The silence, once a symbol of absence, now felt like a balm, a peaceful quietude after the boisterous clamor of autumn. She noticed for the first time the intricate patterns of frost that adorned the twigs, like delicate lace spun by unseen hands. She saw how the weak winter sun, when it managed to break through the clouds, cast long, ethereal shadows across the snow, transforming the familiar landscape into something otherworldly. The world was not dead, it was simply sleeping, gathering its strength for the eventual return of life. She remembered Crimson, not with the agonizing ache of its absence, but with a gentle fondness. Its vibrant color had been a beacon, a tiny flame of joy in the fading light of autumn. It had brought her happiness, had inspired her imagination, had given her a purpose, however fleeting. Its significance, she now understood, wasn't in its ability to defy the season, to hold back the inevitable march of winter. Its significance lay in its beauty, in its ephemeral existence, in the joy it had brought her during its time. The magic, Elara realized, wasn't about holding on, about preserving what was destined to fade. The true magic lay in the appreciation, in the ability to find beauty in the transient, to cherish the fleeting moments for the light they brought. Crimson's story was not a tragedy of loss, but a testament to the beauty of a moment, a vibrant splash of color that had enriched the tapestry of autumn. Its purpose had been fulfilled not by clinging on, but by its very existence, by its brief, brilliant display. She looked at the other trees, their branches heavy with snow, and saw a different kind of magic. They were not defeated. They were enduring. They held within them the promise of spring, the quiet determination to bloom again. Their stillness was not an end, but a pause, a period of rest and rejuvenation. This too was a form of magic, the quiet, persistent magic of resilience. Her perspective shifted. The world, once a battleground between autumn's last stand and winter's icy grip, now felt like a grand unfolding narrative. Each season had its own unique beauty, its own distinct magic. Autumn's was in its vibrant farewell, its riot of color and its melancholic charm. Winter's was in its hushed stillness, its stark beauty, and the promise of renewal it held within its frozen heart. She no longer felt the desperate need to preserve. Instead, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for what had been. She looked at the snow-covered landscape, not as a void, but as a peaceful sanctuary. The quietude of Maple Street was no longer a symbol of loss, but a testament to nature's restorative power. The magic wasn't in defying the natural order, but in understanding and appreciating its intricate, ever-changing rhythm. As Elara stood beneath the snow-laden maple, a sense of peace settled over her. The ache in her heart had subsided, replaced by a quiet understanding. Crimson had been a gift, a fleeting moment of brilliance that had taught her a profound lesson. The real magic wasn't in its continued existence, but in its beautiful departure, a departure that had opened her eyes to the enduring beauty of the world, even in its most dormant state. She had learned that some things are meant to be cherished for their brevity, for the unique sparkle they bring to a specific time, and that the magic of life lies not in its permanence, but in its ever-present transformative cycle. She had seen the unveiling of true magic, not in the defiance of a single leaf, but in the quiet, profound beauty of winter's rain and the enduring promise of spring. The world, once a source of anxiety, now felt like a wondrous, ever-changing masterpiece, and she, Elara, was a quiet observer, her heart open to its every season. The raw, untamed grief that had initially gripped Elara began to loosen its hold, not by force, but by a gentle, insistent thawing from within. The stark white landscape, which had seemed a cruel monument to her loss, slowly began to reveal its own subtle language of beauty. She found herself drawn back to the maple tree, not with the desperate urgency of a mourner, but with the quiet reverence of a pilgrim. Her visits became less about the missing leaf and more about the tree itself, about the silent strength it displayed under its mantle of snow. The bare branches, which had once appeared as accusatory fingers pointing to her defeat, now seemed like intricate etchings against the pale sky, each twist and turn telling a story of endurance. She started to notice the frost. It wasn't just ice. It was a delicate, ephemeral artistry, transforming the most ordinary twigs into crystalline sculptures. Tiny perfect hexagons and starbursts clung to the bark, catching the weak winter sunlight and refracting it into 1,000 miniature rainbows. It was a beauty born of the cold, a testament to the fact that even in what seemed like desolation, life found a way to express itself. albeit in a form different from the vibrant, boisterous life of autumn. This realization that beauty could exist in stillness, in dormancy, was a profound shift in her understanding. It was as if the world had been speaking a language she hadn't been attuned to, and the loss of crimson had finally tuned her ear. Her parents, observing this subtle transformation in their daughter, offered their support with a quiet wisdom. They didn't try to distract her from her feelings or rush her through her sorrow. Instead, they simply allowed her the space to process. Her mother would often bring her a warm blanket and sit beside her in comfortable silence as Elara gazed out the window, her gaze no longer fixed on a single point of loss, but drifting across the hushed expanse of Maple Street. Her father, usually a man of action and practical solutions, would sometimes sit with her, sharing anecdotes about winters from his own childhood, stories that spoke not of hardship, but of the quiet joys found in the starkness of the season, skating on frozen ponds, the crispness of the air, the comforting glow of a hearth. These shared moments, imbued with a gentle acceptance, were more healing than any hurried attempt to cheer her up could have been. Elara began to understand that her desperate clinging to crimson had been a kind of blindness. In her fierce determination to keep that one splash of color alive, she had been unable to appreciate the muted, ethereal beauty that winter brought. She had seen the absence of red, but not the presence of white. She had felt the cold, but not the quietude. The leaf, in its vibrant existence, had been a perfect symbol of autumn's fleeting glory. But its purpose, she now understood, was not to endure into winter. Its purpose was to be beautiful while it could, to burn brightly in its season. This realization was not a sudden epiphany, but a gradual unfolding, like the slow unfurling of a fern frond in spring. It came in quiet moments, watching a single snowflake drift past the window and land softly on the snow-covered lawn, noticing the way the branches of the oak trees, stripped bare, formed a complex, almost architectural pattern against the sky, hearing the distant, muffled sound of children's laughter as they played in the snow. A sound that spoke of life and joy, not of loss. These were the threads of winter's tapestry, and she was finally beginning to see them. She started to journal, filling the pages with her observations and thoughts. Her entries were no longer filled with lamentations about crimson, but with descriptions of the winter world. "The snow is like 1,000 tiny diamonds scattered across the grass," she wrote one afternoon. Another day, she recorded, "The maple tree looks like it's wearing a white lace dress." These words, penned in her childish script, were markers of her internal journey, evidence of a spirit reorienting itself, finding solace and wonder in unexpected places. The concept of impermanence, once a source of profound sorrow, began to take on a different hue. She realized that it was precisely because things were impermanent that they held such precious value. If the vibrant colors of autumn lasted forever, would they be as breathtaking? If the joy of a sunny day persisted without end, would it be as deeply cherished? The transient nature of beauty, she was learning, was not a flaw, but an essential part of its allure. Crimson, by its very briefness, had burned all the brighter. Its story was not one of tragic demise, but of a glorious, albeit temporary, existence. She began to see this lesson reflected in other aspects of her life. The way her mother's favorite flowers, the bright zinnias, bloomed fiercely for a few months and then faded, making way for the winter garden. The way her father's stories, while cherished, were always part of a larger, ongoing narrative, not static relics of the past. Life itself, she was discovering, was a constant cycle of blooming and fading, of beginnings and endings, and the beauty of it lay in embracing the whole dance, not just the moments of vibrant bloom. The resilience of nature became a powerful metaphor for her own emotional strength. The trees, stripped bare, were not dead. They were resting, gathering strength, their roots anchoring them firmly in the earth, their sap held deep within, waiting for the signal of spring. This quiet waiting, this assured promise of return, was a profound comfort. It taught her that even in periods of apparent stillness or hardship, there was an underlying vitality, a persistent hope for renewal. Maple Street, once a symbol of the vibrant life of autumn and the subsequent loss, was slowly becoming a symbol of continuity. The snow would eventually melt, revealing the green shoots of new growth. The trees would bud, and the birds would return to sing. The cycle would continue, indifferent to her grief, yet intimately connected to the rhythm of her own heart. This understanding brought a sense of peace, a feeling of being part of something much larger and more enduring than her own individual joys and sorrows. She started to engage with the winter world more fully. She would walk through the quiet streets, feeling the crunch of snow under her boots, breathing in the crisp, clean air. She would build small snow figures, not with the frantic energy of trying to capture a fleeting moment, but with the calm focus of creating something beautiful for its own sake, knowing it too would eventually melt away. These acts were not a denial of her past feelings, but an integration of them. She carried the memory of crimson, not as a burden, but as a quiet whisper of appreciation for all that was beautiful, no matter how brief. The magic she had once sought in a single, defiant leaf was now being revealed in the grand, sweeping narrative of the seasons. It was in the stark beauty of a winter landscape, in the silent promise of spring, in the vibrant explosion of summer, and in the melancholic farewell of autumn. Her initial belief that magic was about holding on to things, about defying the natural order, had been replaced by a deeper, more profound understanding. True magic lay in surrender, in acceptance, in the ability to find wonder in the transient, and to trust in the enduring rhythm of change. The loss of crimson, the bright splash of red against the encroaching white, had not been an end, but a beginning, the beginning of Elara's true understanding of the world's quiet, persistent magic. She had learned the profound lesson of letting go, not as an act of defeat, but as an act of opening oneself to the abundance of what was and what would be. And so Elara learned that the true magic of the world is not in holding on, but in noticing the fleeting beauty around us and in cherishing every moment as it comes. May the quiet wonder of the seasons, the soft fall of leaves, and the gentle rhythm of life guide you into rest tonight. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let your dreams unfold as softly and serenely as a crimson leaf falling through the autumn air.